Welcome back, Dream Media Colorado family. In previous part, I unboxed all the necessary equipment to build Lutron Shade double-side mock-up window. In this part, we're going to build a Lutron Shade double-side mock-up window, so let's get started.
So, even though I said I like using a speed square for very finite measurements, a shade placement is not the end of the world if you're off by 1/4 of an inch. The shade wire, sorry. The shade is very sensitive to mismeasurements. So it's really not that big of a deal dealing with the inaccuracies of a tape. And yes, it would be a lot easier to measure this from the top right now. But if you can imagine this is a windowsill installed in a house, this is typically how this process is done. So go ahead and get a mark at 6 inches, line that up. And I am going to be pulling on this, but obviously you would just be using the tape measure to bump in a typical install like this. All right, and again, it'd be a lot easier to drill from the top. I'm going to drill from the bottom, given the fact that this is a mock-up of a shade installed in a wall. So nothing specific. I'm using a 5/8 inch bit here, but whatever drill bit you have that is the right size for the wire you're utilizing. Then we're going to go ahead and pop this hole. All right. So the speaker wire came nice and zip tied, and given that I need almost none of it, I'm going to try and keep it nice and zip tied. All right. So you can see that is theoretically where your wire should come in. I'm going to leave it stubbed here so it's not in the way of the rest of the install. But, all right. So first thing we're going to do here is I'm actually going to leave the shade wrapped up. I like leaving the shade wrapped up as long as possible. This is just cardboard paper. It tears really easily. I see most technicians completely unwrap this, expose the fabric, hang it, and then they will go ahead and do work with the wireless repeater and all that right above the exposed, very expensive Lutron fabric. So I have all my techs do this as well. We try and leave this wrapped up unless for some specific reason with the install, we would need to unwrap it. So the shade we're looking at today is a right motor drive. They can be ordered either way. They can also be swapped in the Savoia QS line, especially Roller 64s. So not everything like Palladiums as they come, that's how it goes, but you're never in a wire issue there. So really with these, for the Palladiums, picking your drive side is more about what's easy to access the motor. So if I had a wall right here and I did a Palladium wire-free up there with the right battery slot, and when I pull that shade out to change the batteries, I'm gonna have to take the whole shade down out of the assembly. Whereas if I had a wall right here, I'd order the Palladium motor side on that side so that the batteries are accessible. So with the wireless ones, your drive side is for serviceability. For a wired shade, your drive side is based on where your wire comes in. I've seen a lot of this where they order the motor wrong and they bring the shade wire over to the far side. It looks a lot cleaner and a lot easier to maintain if you were to just switch your drive and idler side and make this a left drive motor. Does that affect the shade's functionality? No. So all that is if you switch the drive side, once you've set your open and close limits, the shade knows nothing else. So I'm not going to run into any issues with roll up or roll down by flipping them. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get our tools staged to get our brackets in. Okay, so typically what I like, there's a lot of ways to go about hanging these shades. Typically what I like to do to make sure I'm hanging the shade properly and getting the best light gap possible is to go ahead and measure the width of the shade rolled up, which should roughly be 2 inches. This fabric's a little loose in here, but I think roughly once squeezed down. Okay, we'll just go with 2 1/4 here. So 2 1/4 in half is 1 inch and 1/8. So the proper way to measure this is going to be to come 1/2 inch off the wall plus half the width of your shade. And the reason why we're doing that is when there's a window here, we want the shade to not rub up against the window, have room to breathe, but be pretty much as close as possible to the window to reduce our light gap, specifically in a shade model that doesn't have a light gap track. So without further ado, to speed up the process, I will be utilizing my speed square here. Yeah. So just to double check, 2 1/4, yep. So 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch plus 1 inch, right? Plus 1/8. So we're going to be at 1 5/8 inches off the back here to go ahead and hang our bracket. And we'll go ahead and replicate that same measurement on the other side here. I don't know why I'm using my big speed square for this. That's kind of ill-advised. So now, all I'm going to do really quickly is extend my measurement line out with the speed square. This is where speed squares come into handy when actually installing into a real window frame, minus that measurement I took from the back there. So you can also measure from the front of the frame and just do some math. That's pretty easy. So where did I put our brackets? All right, so the easiest way to do it with this install, where we're going to be mounting to the roof, I will probably bring a camera in real quick to show you guys up close. All right, so like I said, when these brackets can install to the side here as well as up under the eave. So today we're going to be going up under the eave. Oh, sorry, wrong window, babe. So as you can see, I've got that line there. So what I'm going to do now is just mark the middle of each of these brackets, and then we're going to mount those directly in line. And it should be a pretty simple process from there. So I'm going to off camera mark halfway through each bracket and then line it up with the marking on the top there. Okay, so what we're going to do now is quickly line up our shade bracket with our measurement, and then go ahead and mark where our tappers are going to be. I do really like hammer taps where you put a hammer up and you tap the back of it. They're just not with me today. I don't quite have all of my tools here. All right, so this is the type of screw we'll be using. It is a self-tapper. Oh, sorry, let me get that on camera. It's a self-tapper. Now this is a 3/4 inch number 8 self-tapper. Lutron sends you number 8 2-inch tappers, which is what you should be using again in the field. All right. If you do Lutron or any shade installs a number of times, get a magnetic bit. Save yourself from dropping this off a ladder when you're way up in the sky. Just make sure I'm still in line there. Whoops. Something I also really like for shade work, which I don't have with me today, it's in my truck, I'm not going to be using it, is a magnetic wristband with holders. So I'll go up with all the hardware stuffed into my wristband, either here or here on my arm, because nothing's worse than consistently dropping screws off a 12-foot ladder and having to go back 100 times up and down the ladder for a single shade. And once you get your process worked out, when you first start out, these shades do feel like they take forever to install. Once you get your technique worked out with 2 guys, you can easily knock out an entire house, at least the installing in one day, and then come back for the programming. But we're going to take it nice and slow today. Just make sure everything's perfect. So something I do like to do, before I hang this, let me show you guys. So as you can see, for flexibility, the bracket has a forward and a sideways one in every configuration. So if you can imagine, I'm lining this up and I get my lines perfectly lined up, and then I shoot into this wide hole. Well, now I can slide left to right. So depending on what you're doing, you know, if you've got it lined up perfectly, go with this one that doesn't have bump left to right. You know you're going to be bumped up against the window. That way you don't have any play left and right to make a mistake. So that's just a tip from hanging hundreds of these in real homes. That's where I notice people mess up, is they let it slide. They do the sliding one first, and then while they're trying to look over their head up in a 12-foot windowsill, they end up being off by 1/8 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch down the line. All right, so those are our shade brackets installed here. Really nice. I will probably bring a camera in really quick just to get a close-up of that. All right, and you can see we came off 1/2 inch standard, plus half the width of our roll, which got us to 1 5/8 on either side here with our line. This is probably the only time I'll have this much time to cover a shade install in real life, because when we're in the field and we're charging labor, I'm knocking these out. There's really no time. So there'll be plenty of fast form videos on Lutron and screen innovation shade installs in the future. But today I really just wanted to break it down, bring a long form content video all the way from constructing these mock-up window frames to our end of video recap with working Pico buttons, dual roller, single roller, showing off a couple different fabric options, showing off the different looks once installed finished, as well as I will be bringing later breakdown videos on the Lutron kit I travel with. I also need to do one on Screen Innovations, where basically if you want these shades and you're interested in them, I can come out to your house with a mock-up wired shade or wireless shade, as well as a bunch of fabric selections. So I carry that with me. So we'll at least do an unboxing on that so you guys can kind of get an idea of what to expect when I come out to your house. So next step is, and again, typically people will go ahead and pull all of the protection off of the shade. I'm going to break the tape here and at least give myself a little more room to work with, so it's easier to pull this off at the end. If you don't break the tape, it may be hard to reach. So again, buttons, we're gonna run buttons down in this configuration. Since I've got a right side wire and a right side motor drive, you install your idler side first, which is gonna be my left side. This side just spins freely. You see how that depresses? So you're gonna put your left side in first, and it doesn't really matter how you line that up. It fits right onto these bracket end caps here. I wish I showed an example. I'll bring you in and get a close-up of this, I think. Give me 1 second here, guys. All right, so we've got our idler side, our motor side with the buttons. So given our wiring, that's gonna be our right side. So my left side is this idler that has ebb and flow. And you can see the way the fabric is rolled up there, the hem bar we want coming out towards the window. There is such a reason to use a reversed roll, which we'll cover at some point when we need it. So this may be a little hard to do with one hand on the camera, but this idler just slides right up over that bracket like that. And then over here on this side, you pull in. I'm gonna have to do this off camera, so I just need 2 hands, but I'll kind of show you what the deal is. So the only thing you really need to be concerned about is that your wiring comes out this backside and doesn't get pinched by the top. But the way it's laid out right now, with the buttons on bottom, I'd be pinching the wire. So I'm gonna have to put this down and fix that, but that's essentially what I just ran into, which is pretty common. So all you're gonna do is just move those wires over to a side. You're gonna let your shade go, and as you can see, we measured everything perfectly, so that'll hold itself up. But now you're gonna wanna come through, now you're gonna wanna come through, and right below the bracket, there's that little silver screw I told you we'd need later. So that guy is just gonna get tightened into place to make sure our shade is always held. Okay, and the screwdriver I had in my hand was just a little small for the job. All right. So this is probably the one part of Lutron construction you can really mess up by being too aggressive. So this is a machine screw on a metal fitting, but the bracket you're grabbing on the Lutron shade, idler, and motor side, they are plastic. So once that's really tight to your hand, or pretty snug, you're probably good there. It's just a security measure. You could see the shade was holding itself up, which is great. So as you can see now, like I would have already been rubbing this wire all over the top of my shade if I had unwrapped the shade completely. So that's why we didn't do that. All right, I think that looks great now. So I'm gonna turn the shade back towards the front where it's visible for you guys. We are then going to remove the rest of our foam that was keeping the shade nice and spiral wrapped. We will go ahead and plug this power supply into power, and I will go over how to set open and close shade limits. And then we will pair the Pico, call it a wrap on this single install with no valance here, and then dive back in a little bit to our dual roller with the track. One of my favorite installation, you know, like probably my favorite shade installation on the market in total is the blackout with light fabric with the light tracks at the top and bottom, so zero light, and then a nice sun shear to come in front. And I think we have a dark gray blackout and then a light gray shear, as well as one of our more beige fabrics that you're looking at here right now. So as you can see, the shade's been rolled up for a while. It's gonna take some time to factory set. So what I like to do is if I'm doing a house with 20 or 30 shades, we'll go ahead, get them on, roughly set our close and open limits, roughly. Because what's gonna happen is this shade will mellow out and then hang a little lower. So what I'll do is should set a rough limit, activate all of them or get them paired with their Picos, go ahead, go around the house, do all 20 shades, so they have time to sit. And then when I actually get to the end of programming or whatever, then I set my open and close shade limits again. Because what'll happen is if you stopped it just above the bottom of the window frame here, once this fabric loosens up and sits more naturally from being in use, it'll tap that there, or it'll maybe hit, like if you have one of those window openers, maybe it hits that now and causes problems. So we will go ahead and do our final adjustments for this scope, but I probably will come back in about a week or two and just dial this open close limit back in. So our shade is powered now. This may be hard to see. We're gonna grab our little poker here and just go ahead and poke something on this to confirm. Okay, we do have power. That's good. And actually, since Lutron didn't include one of those wire mounts, I am gonna tack these up. I don't like it. Who knows what will happen if this was a customer shade over a 10-year install life if I don't secure these wires properly right now. Okay, right there. All right. So we'll go ahead and get another picture of that for the Lutron text. So essentially what's gonna happen here is you're going to tap the close limit button. That's the dark button I showed in the close-up. That will illuminate. Then you press the down arrow to get it all the, like, to where you want it going down, and then you'll press and hold the down or the up, depending on what you're doing, until the LED flashes at you, and that's how you know you've set your limit. So this may be hard to see, but on the front here, okay, big note, if you overdo it, sorry guys, 1 second. All right, so maybe you saw that LED flash, maybe you didn't. So let's say, you know, I just wanted to make sure that we're not touching. We've got no contact with the bottom of the window frame with our shade. I actually don't like that because, like I had just talked about, it's gonna set, and I just didn't leave enough room. So you may ask, well, Chase, why didn't you just bump adjust that back up half a centimeter, half an inch to get it where you wanted to? And that is fairly simple. So that is currently my open limit, which is not right. What I don't want to do with the open limit is something like this, where the hem bar rolls back up around. The highest you want to go is essentially to where the hem bar is hanging just below the shade, so that way it doesn't bump the back of the window. But why did I go all the way back up to reshoot my bottom shade limit? And I really wanted to show this for technicians out there. So if I drop it, all motors have play. Every shade motor, every motorized screen, they have play. So if I go all the way down and then I bump it up, I'm no longer compensating for the play the motor has when rolling down. So what I want to do is approach it the way I'm locking it. So again, I'm going to hit my close limit until the LED lights up. We're going to roll it back up. We're going to leave about half an inch there to let the shade sag. And then we're going to set our shade limit. Boom. Okay, so now when I hit close, it's going to stop here. And again, if I went down, hit this, and then pulled it up, maybe there's a loose fabric, maybe it looked perfect, but then when I roll back down, it ends up hitting or sitting higher. So again, however you approach it is how you want to address it. Okay, so this is much easier in the software if you're doing a system with the software, because you can bump by such a minute amount. Okay, so there's our up and down limit, so let's just test it out. Hit our close button. All right. So single press brings you into shade activation mode, where you set the up and down level, and then just a double tap on the open or the close is how you manually test it. I almost never do it this way, guys. All I use those buttons for typically is to activate it to my whole home processor. As you can see, we had a good track down, a good track up. We're done. We've installed the shade, measured everything perfectly, got our wires super nice and clean here. I may even OCD put one more wire holder up there just to make sure this enclosure / display is good forever, essentially. Just you're doing anything like this, be very mindful of nicking your shade or the shade fabric at all. All right, so that looks great, minus these tags I'm not taping up. All right, so we saw the Pico, right? Up close and personal. So what we are gonna do now is press and hold the open button on the shade until it starts flashing at us. Then you're gonna tap clockwise, which is the button closest to the shade. Then you're gonna hold the close button on your Pico until it starts flashing. Okay, and that wiggle was essentially our confirmation from the shade that he heard from the Pico and they're now a pair. So I can go ahead and hit the down button, which I just pressed. And check this out. Guys, this shade is whisper quiet. That is my favorite thing about Lutron. They are so quiet. And as you can see, there's these wrinkles. We're gonna let this shade hang down during our next install, outside of when I'm screwing holes for the wire harness. So that was my up and down button, and you can see here I've got the finite control. Maybe the sun's only coming in around here or above here in your house. You drop the shade to there, you still got your beautiful view of the mountains in the background and your shade there. So again, this couldn't be simpler. And again, this can be wall mounted into a faceplate, just like a light switch. So if you got some kitchen shades, you can have a 2-button, a 3-button up down, as well as the group button, which essentially just tells the shade to stop. Like this little select button in the middle, a little circle there, was the only part of the remote I did not go over previously. Okay, so we've got our down button, which hopefully you can see both the remote and the shade in the background here. Up button, and again, this is just going off the limits we just set. Our fine tune button, down. Our fine tune up. And then let's say we just hit close because we don't want to sit there and hold the button. Now we can go stop. And there you go, guys. So that's your breakdown on a single Savoia QS Roller 64. This is a light fabric. And to me, this is a light filtering fabric. So this isn't a complete blackout. This will still allow sunlight in, but gives you a nice bit of privacy and lets you really control the vibe of your room. We'll take that to the next step in our Roller 100 video, where we do a dual roller with a track for light gap. So anyway, guys, this is a typical install. And again, this can be finished with a Lutron fascia, which are metal. It can also be, which is most typical, almost every job I do, where they're in the price market for Lutron shades, they'll have a carpenter come in and build a valance that matches the trim, the windowsill, so it just fits seamlessly. You know, I can come in here and put a flat valance now on this window. I can also come in and make this a pocket after the fact as a carpenter. The most common way I see it is you build a box with a pocket recessed to about an inch in front of the shade here. And then you'll go ahead and build the frame of the window, because imagine if this is a window frame like this, you've got trim, and then you'll just mount that into the trim board for it and really create a nice seamless design. So this is a great example of an in wall. Again, these can be mounted up here, put in a box. They can be mounted on the top. They can reverse roll and be at the edge of the window for some reason, which I do believe we have a reverse and a regular roll in the dual series coming up. Thanks for joining with me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and this follow along. I really wanted to take a deep dive, build a mock-up window so I can really just take my time here and show off the capabilities of Lutron and just how elegant these shading solutions can be. So again, we unboxed, saw every component in this one-off standalone little Lutron system here, from our power supplies. We went over the wiring harnesses. We showed you how to pair to Pico remotes. Maybe for some reason your remote broke, you don't want a technician out. It could not be simpler. Hold open till it flashes. Press clockwise, which is the directional button right next to it if you haven't looked at a clock in a while. And then you hold the close button on this. Every step of the process has haptic feedback. Once it enters activation mode, it'll flash. You'll get a slower pulsing once it's trying to activate, once you've hit that clockwise button. And then this Pico will flash really rapidly. And then you guys saw it here, but you'll get, if you did it right, you'll get that visual feedback. If not, let the shade go blank, repeat the process until you got it. Sometimes you can just, whiff the setup window just a little bit. So again, thanks for joining me. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, thanks for joining with Dream Media Colorado. Like and subscribe, guys.